Hello there, everyone. It is Colin Slater back with another weird tech find. Today I've got with me right here the Dell Optiplex 9020 Micro. I actually picked this up earlier today in the morning. I went to my university surplus store where they sell stuff that the university isn't using anymore, and as I was looking around, I only found one or two things that were good today. I noticed this on a shelf. It's well, at a first glance, it's just a computer, but if you take a better look at it, you're going to notice that this thing is pretty small, to say the least. Just to give something for scale, here's my hand, and I have pretty standard-sized hands for a dude. So, sure, it's just your standard everyday computer, but it's pretty tiny. In fact, when I got home, I measured it, and I will get my tape measure right here if I can find it. Here it is. I measured it, and this thing is only about 7 inches by another 7 inches. So that grabbed my attention at first, and the other part that grabbed my attention was the fact that this thing only cost $15. So I figured, looks a little interesting, very unconventional, and it's only 15 bucks, so why not pick it up and look into it and see if I can learn some more about it, because it turns out when I got home and I did some research, this is actually a pretty interesting computer. Not one that I'm pretty sure anyone would ever really want to buy, but it's definitely super interesting. Just to give a quick rundown on the specs, this was released in 2014 and is based on Intel's Haswell platform, so that's their 4th generation. It's got a Core, not i7, and a i5-4590T, which is clocked at 2 gigahertz, and I believe it turbo boosts up to 4. You're probably unfamiliar with the T letter after Intel processor names, which I was too until I looked it up. Apparently that's the letter that Intel for a while, and I think they still do use it on mobile platforms and some embedded platforms. It's the letter they use when a processor is low power, and in this case the i5 in here is only 35 watts, which just for comparison, the Precision I have been working on in the past 2 videos, its CPU runs at 47 watts. So the processor in this has a lower wattage than a pretty common laptop CPU. So that's just giving you a general idea. Besides that, this doesn't have a drive in it right now. Generally, the university will pull the drives out of computers before they sell them, which I get that. You need to maintain information security. Memory-wise, it actually has 16 gigs of DDR3. Believe it or not, this thing has 16 gigs of DDR3. You probably wouldn't think so when you look at it. You'd probably think this is a pretty low-end machine, and I guess in some respects it is, but not entirely. Obviously, as you could probably guess, this has no GPU, simply because there's no room for one. It has the standard Intel integrated graphics, but that's the most you're gonna get. And besides that, that's all there really is to tell you spec-wise, because like I said, there's no GPU. If we look at the back, I can show you some of the I/O. Curiously, you got a display port and you got a VGA, but no HDMI, curiously. So you got to pick one of these two. I was going to plug this in and show you guys around, but honestly, it's just a standard computer, so I think I'm going to take it apart and tell you guys about it instead of plugging it in. But anyways, besides those 2 ports, you've got 4 USB ports. I'm assuming these are all USB 2, just due to the date that this machine released. And the fact that they aren't blue, which around this time, if it was USB 3, typically the ports would be blue. As you can see, there's a power symbol right here, which I'm assuming means it's one of the USB ports where it will still continue to provide power if the machine is in sleep mode. Besides that, you got your standard Ethernet port, and I'm not exactly sure what this is. In fact, I do have the Dell spec sheet with me right now, but it's focused on the larger editions of the 9020, so it might not be helpful. But if I take a quick look at the I/O ports, you look at the rear, let's see. External antenna. Okay, so I'm assuming if this was going to be connected to some sort of TV or TV tuner, which makes me think that this was probably used in one of the university's TV studios. I can't say that for sure, but it's just a guess based on the fact that, based on what I'm seeing, this actually was optional, so they definitely paid extra for this. So if they were paying extra, they definitely had some sort of use for it. So, you're pretty standard I/O. You're missing a few things. Obviously, no expansion slots. You got USB only, no PS2, which I wouldn't say was common for the time, but, it's not here, so I guess it's worth noting. What's really interesting about the back of this computer and the I/O is that you don't have your standard power cord slot. You don't have the 3-pin. You don't even have the 2-pin. In fact, this power adapter right here that I'm pointing out with my finger, this is the power adapter slot that is used for Dell's XPS laptops. I think they may have migrated away from this in recent years, but up until a few years ago at least, and maybe they're still using it, this was the power slot that Dell used for for most of their laptops, or at least their higher end XPS laptops. And in fact, when I was looking at when I typed in the service tag and I looked up a little more about this laptop and what it shipped with, I found out that this shipped with a 65 watt laptop power charger. So these things ran off laptop power chargers, which is pretty surprising, honestly. But I mean, given the low power nature in terms of energy use of the machine, I guess I shouldn't be too surprised. But that's something neat to see. And in fact, when we do open this up in a few minutes, you're going to see that this machine resembles a laptop on the inside too, a little bit. But it's definitely something interesting to see. If we flip it over real quick, we'll see it shipped with Windows 8 Pro. Obviously, released in 2014, so Windows 10 didn't come out yet. They must not have had a need for Windows 7 for compatibility, so of course they just went with the most modern version of Windows at the time. No surprise there. Flipping it to the front, you've got 2 USB ports, headphone jack, audio or microphone jack, pretty standard. Right here you got the Dell logo, and in fact I didn't learn this until I was taking a picture for the thumbnail. You can actually move this around. So if I wanted to have the computer up like this, I'd have the Dell logo like this. If I wanted to have it down on the spacers, I could pull it out, if I can do it properly, and have it look like this, which is cool, I guess. I like that you got that versatility, but I'm kind of surprised they did this, given everything I could find out about these ultra small form factor, or they're not ultra small form factors, they're micro, because I originally thought this was the ultra small form factor, but it's something even smaller. But the appeal of these micro form factor computers, based on what I could conclude from my research, is that Dell essentially wanted people to mount these on the back of their monitors. So you buy a Dell monitor and then you buy one of these and mount it on the back of the monitor, and you'd essentially have your own Dell all-in-one. And then you might be wondering, if that's the case, why not just buy an all-in-one? And I'm guessing, especially considering the fact this was in I wouldn't say an enterprise use case, but it was in some sort of professional use case. It was being used somewhere by the university. I'm guessing the appeal of these, as opposed combined with a Dell monitor, as opposed to just a standard Dell all-in-one, which I'm 90% sure they were making at the time, is that, say something on this broke, or you needed to upgrade it for some reason, which I actually believe this was upgraded, because based on the service tag, this shipped with 8 gigs of RAM, and I haven't looked at the RAM sticks yet, but it was advertised today as being sold with 16 gigs of RAM. So that sticks out to me as a reason these were probably purchased with Dell monitors over all-in-ones, just that they could be upgraded. Whereas an all-in-one, sometimes they can be upgraded, probably especially the ones 10 years ago, but there's a lot more effort required. You got to tear the thing apart, you risk breaking it, and with these, you just take it off the mount, open this thing up, change what you need to change, which that makes sense. In an enterprise use case, you just have more control over the machine. It's easier to use. So I guess it makes sense. But when I was doing some research, I found out that Dell actually still sells these today. Obviously not this particular model because it's 10 years old. But they are still selling the micro form factor Dell Optiplexes. And they're advertising them for the same reason. Mount them on the back of a monitor. Save space. I believe the other selling point was that if you needed 2 machines right next to each other, then space really becomes a concern, and that's why you'd want to mount it on the back of a monitor. But they're still selling it for the same reason, and these things, for the amount of performance you're getting, are not that well priced. In fact, I believe I saw one selling for $1,000 for, pretty mid-range specs, when you could probably get something much, much better with that price point if you were willing to go even a little bit bigger, even if you stayed within the small form factor. But, that's my rambling just about this computer, in terms of its existence in this form factor. But I figured, now that I've given a little basic interview, I should open this thing up and show you the inside and tell you about how this thing essentially is just a laptop in a different shell. But I'll open this thing up and I'll show you guys. So first of all, I gotta take this screw out on the back, which it actually doesn't fully come out. It just screws out to the point where it's possible to take off the front. And here's where another unique feature of this computer comes out, and that's that when you take this off, instead of there just being this plate right here that comes off, which is pretty standard with most computer cases, it actually, if I can take it off, takes the whole front panel off, which I'm not sure why it does that, but maybe it's so it's secured better. It just needs the extra grip right here. But anyways, now that we've taken it off, we can see on the inside, and something that really surprised me when I open this up later today is that there's no mSATA slot in here. I figured something this small, there wasn't going to be a 2.5-inch SATA drive slot. There'd just be an mSATA slot. But no, there is not. You can see right here, this blue shell right here. Obviously, there's nothing in it right now. But as you can see, this is designed to hold a 2.5-inch SATA drive, whether that be a hard drive or an SSD. It's designed to hold one of those. And you can see the slot right here, which is definitely interesting. You can also see the Wi-Fi card right here, which, when something is this small, especially for the time it came out, stuff like Wi-Fi, Bluetooth, not a sure thing. So it's interesting to see that it had it. Down here, you can see the cooling system, which is more advanced than I thought. I thought they just slapped some small fan on top of it and vent it out, which is what they did, but I thought it'd be even simpler. And under there, you got the CPU, which I'm gonna take this fan off in a second and just show you what we got under there, because I actually haven't been under here yet. I know the RAM's under here. I could take a glimpse, and I know the CPU's under here, but I'm not exactly sure if the CPU's soldered in yet. I don't think so, based off what I'm seeing. But we'll take a look at that in a second. But first of all, as you can see, this is a tiny motherboard, and they do not leave any empty space here. With that drive in here, if there was one, you'd have the drive right here covering the motherboard, and then on the other side of the computer, you've got more motherboard covered by a cooling system, and that's it. There's no empty space, which is just interesting to see something this tightly packed, because even the small form factor computers you see, whether they're from Dell or whether they're custom built, usually they've got some sort of free space, and you can expand them in some way. But as you can see, there's no expansion slots in here. Even if you wanted to, there's really nothing you can do. And even if the power supply could afford it, which it can't, but even if it could, there's simply no options here. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this heatsink off. We're going to see what's underneath here. And just so you don't have to watch stuff get unscrewed for a few minutes, I'm going to leave you guys for a minute, and then I'll come back when it's done. Alright, so I'm about to take the heatsink off right now, and it does appear I was wrong. I thought these two screws right here that my fingers are touching were securing the heatsink in place too. Or not the heatsink, the fan, which I guess is, kind of the same thing. But I thought these two screws were securing it in place, and it turns out, no, they were not. So this actually comes off pretty easy if you unscrew these 4 screws, and then I will... Actually, not going to unplug this, because I don't need to rip this thing apart, but I just want to show you guys what the internals look like. And as you can see, I am actually a little bit surprised. Actually, I am going to take this out so I can show you guys. I'm a little surprised. You actually do have a standard CPU socket in here, which makes me wonder if this CPU is upgradable. I mean, I don't see why it wouldn't, but I'm guessing that your options are pretty limited just due to the fact that this thing designed to only run on 65 watts of power, which is less than most laptop power adapters these days, and even for the time. So I'm guessing even if you are able to, which again I don't see why you wouldn't be able to, the options of which processors you could feasibly upgrade to without there being some power supply issues is pretty limited. But that is interesting to see. If I can get up close, it's covered in thermal paste, so it's probably not going to want to focus on anything. No, it's not. But yep, you can see under there. I can read it. You guys can't. It says i5 4590T, 2 gigahertz, and it's got the full socket there, which I'm surprised. I actually thought this thing was going to be soldered, but that's very neat to see. And then something unique over here is that you see we do have 2 sticks of RAM, and I will pull one out. You can see right here, you know, if it'll focus. There we go. See, 8 gigabytes, DDR3L. You can tell it goes to the P3L. There's a second stick in there, which is cool. But what's unique about this computer, and you probably already noticed, is that this is not desktop RAM. This is laptop RAM. This is a SODIMM, meaning it's a lot smaller. So I don't think it's thinner, but it's not as wide, which means there's not really downsides to SODIMMs as far as I'm aware. They're just more expensive because you have to essentially do the same thing with less space. You have to pack it into a smaller area. But that's definitely interesting, and it does appear this was upgraded. I was worried when I looked at the service tag that this actually wouldn't have 16 gigs of RAM, that they advertised it improperly, which, these places do make mistakes. They go through hundreds of computers. I'm not holding a small mistake against them, but I was worried that it might only have 8 gigabytes of RAM, but no, it actually does have both, which means this definitely was upgraded at some point. If the service tag says it was only shipped with 16 gigs of RAM, which makes me wonder what the university was doing where this small form factor computer needed more memory. I don't know. Quite a puzzling question. Who knows? Again, I think it's something media related, due to, if it'll focus, that antenna port down there. But I'm not sure. Maybe, I doubt they were video editing without a GPU, but who knows? But still, it's very interesting to see, because you got a standard desktop CPU socket, but then you have laptop RAM. I thought this was going to have a soldered CPU, and it was essentially going to have a laptop motherboard. And in a way, it is much like a laptop in that you don't have expansion slots. You got one drive slot. You're using laptop memory. It's extremely low power. But I guess it does maintain its desktop core, and that it has a desktop CPU, which means I guess something's upgradable, in addition to the RAM and the storage. But that's very interesting to see. The 16 gigs of RAM that are in here, actually, according to the owner's manual, is the maximum that this system does support, which doesn't surprise me. I don't know why it would need to support more, and obviously there's definitely chipset limitations. But I'll put this back in here, and as the camera focuses again, I'll give you guys a better look about what we got on the inside. Under this heatsink, I'm not exactly sure what this is. A lot of motherboards have it, but I'm not sure. You got the CMOS battery right there, which I'm assuming is still in good shape. There's your Wi-Fi card, which I already pointed out. But, as I've repeated many times throughout this video, it's a very, very simple packed-in system. There's not really ports for anything. No expansion ports. You got your Wi-Fi card. You got your RAM. You got your CPU. No GPU. You got your ports on the inside and the outside, and it's, I guess more than anything, it's just an impressive computer to look at, because 10 years ago they shoved all this, a fully functional computer, which, albeit it was quite expensive for the time. I don't have exact price figures for this configuration, but the fully maxed out configuration, I believe, was around $1,000 for specs that really were not that great, even for the time. But it's just a neat computer to observe, because it's so tiny, but yet it's not exactly weak either. It is low power, but I definitely wouldn't refer to this as low end for the time. And even today, I bet this can still do basic web browsing, watch some videos. You're not playing games on this. You're not editing videos. You're not doing anything intensive. But if it's still a computer, it'll still do basic stuff. You can write a term paper on it, but it's just very interesting to see, and it's not something I expected to see in the store today, because it's abruptly the size of my hand. But if I put this heatsink back on, in fact, I'll have to plug it back in right here. and put this thing back together, I'll just round this out, and I'll focus on the big question with this, which is, what exactly can you still do with this computer today? Because a lot of old computers, yeah, they're fun to mess with. They're fun to, put their original operating system on, like I did with XP on the 4700, which wasn't its original operating system, but it was, one that it supported, and may have had a legitimate use case. But a big question with these old computers is what can they do today, realistically. And with that 4700 I worked with in the past 2 videos, it's pretty simple. It could be a home server. You could run some old software on it. You can use the I/O ports that aren't commonplace on modern computers or laptops, and use those to make use of some older peripherals. But with this, I'm not exactly sure, because, like I said, yeah, I can do some basic web browsing. Can probably watch some videos, but a phone can do that. Anything else can do that. If you want to do something more advanced, I guess you could home server this computer, but say you don't own this. Say you don't have an option to buy this really cheap like I did. You're not going to have a reason to go out of your way and get one of these. You're more likely to go get a full tower that you can upgrade, or even a small form factor PC that isn't this small, because it's just easier to mess with. I'm willing to guess there's a lower chance of failure with those bigger computers. Not a lower chance of failure, but they're easier to maintain, because if something goes wrong, these computers were pretty rare. There's not much I can do to fix it. It's just broken. And you also have more options. For instance, I can only put a SATA drive in this. What if I have an mSATA drive laying around that I want to use? That part of fixing up older computers is that a lot of times it's cheap because you get to use the hardware that you already have on hand. For instance, I could put when I did the M4700 in the previous video, I put an SSD that I just had in it, and so that was free to me. Granted, I paid for that at one time, but still, it's just sitting around my house. So completing that, or not my house, my apartment, but completing that project, at that time was free. It was something I could just do like that. I didn't need to order something. I didn't need to do this or that. I could just do it on the fly, and I could make use of it. And that's not something I feel like you can do with this. You're going to need pretty specific parts. If you want to upgrade it, your options are probably pretty limited. You need laptop memory, which is more expensive. And so you are you're quite limited in that regard. So that just begs the question of, what do you do? And what or not what do you do, but would you ever really buy one of these if you had the option? And the answer is probably no. It's a cool novelty, and if you like collecting tech novelties like I do, definitely it's something that I would pick up, and I did because I thought it was cool. But I don't know what I'm gonna do with this. With other projects I have, I say, okay, I'm gonna do this or this with them, or even if I don't have a use for them, I'll be able to resell them. To someone who will have a legitimate use, and at the very least, I won't lose money on it. I will have had my fun messing with the computer, and then I can resell it to someone who will be able to use it for some legitimate purpose. But I can't really say that with this one, because the only people who are going to be interested in a computer like this are going to be people who are like me, and they like collecting these things because they're novelties. They want a small form factor PC, even this small. They're going to go newer. If they really have a need for something like this, they're not going to pick something up from 10 years ago. But, it is an interesting novelty, all that considered. I guess there still are uses for it if we really do want to push the limits. But again, the issue is anything that this thing can do, any old computer can do better. And, these days there isn't the need for the... I don't think you're going to need to be mounting this on the back of a monitor. But, it's definitely interesting to see. And it's more of a novelty these days than something that has actual utility. But, I'm happy I picked it up because it's cool to see. It's cool to experiment with. I'm particularly interested in the fact that this uses a laptop power supply, which... Luckily, I have a lot of those because I prefer to work with laptops over desktops. But I'm happy I got it, and I'm not sure what I'm going to do with it now. Obviously it's not taking up a lot of space. It's 7 inches by 7 inches, only weighs about 3 pounds, which I forgot to mention earlier. So I might hold on to it just for the novelty, or I actually looked it up earlier. If I wanted to sell the RAM and the CPU inside it, I'd more than make my money back off this thing. But again, I feel like ruining a tech novelty like this isn't in my isn't in my best interest, but just isn't what someone like me should do, given what I like doing with old computers. But I might find a use for it. I can't really think of one right now. I get my whole spiel about how even if you want to mess around with old computers, you're going to get just about anything else. But if anyone watching can think of anything I should do with this computer realistically, and that might have a legitimate use that could be useful, let me know, because I don't want to see a computer like this that's so unique go to waste. Because until I saw this thing in the surplus store today, I had never seen a computer, or a desktop computer this small. Obviously I had seen pictures online of stuff like I remember the Intel Compute Stick, but nothing like this in person. And so I was like, okay, I gotta buy it. I'm interested. So if you can think of anything I can do to kind of get some use out of this machine and keep it alive, let me know, because I'd hate to see it go to waste. But that's all from me today. I hope you enjoyed my little spiel about this unique computer. And if you got any suggestions about what I should do with it, or what I should talk about next, feel free to let me know. And hopefully you enjoyed this, and I'll see you guys next time. Have a good day.